Eamon, I heard you last week saying you were going down to the trial of this woman, Ruth Lawrence, she's pleaded not guilty to murdering Anthony Keegan and Eoin O'Connor at a date unknown in 2014. I heard you talking about the opening, and I was looking forward to talking to you this week as the trial continues. So what has been heard and what's happened?
Yeah, so we're kind of getting into day 3 of the case, which should have happened today. But the jury were told it had been a development in that a significant witness is in a medical situation and that both sides will need to consider whether the trial can continue in their absence. So the jury have been sent home and told to come back Thursday morning. And that's really as far as Judge Tony Hunter wanted to go into it. He said, look, he wasn't specific about who the witness was, except to say it was somebody who's significant to both sides of the case, and it is a medical situation. And he said they don't even have the full details. This is what the jury were told. They don't have the full details, and that is yet to be ascertained. He said, look, the unforeseeable, this happens in everyone's lives. And again, he was saying that because they both everyone will have to consider exactly how it bears on the availability of the witness and whether, the trial can continue or indeed the defence can continue. And as he put it, there's a lot of moving parts to that. So he was basically said, we expect more information to be forthcoming and we'll see you on Thursday at 11 o'clock. It's when it's going to start again. Okay,
so in that case, all we can do is we can recap on what has been heard so far.
Yes, because he also warned the jury not to speculate as to what might be going on.
That's
that's exactly why we're not going to speculate on what's going on either.
I'm gluing my lips together here so I don't cause any difficulties.
The opening address last week, Michael O'Higgins for the prosecution kind of outlined it, and it was basically Miss Lawrence is accused of shooting a drug dealer, Mr. Eoin O'Connor, and his friend Anthony Keegan in and around kind of on this, I think it's the 21st, 22nd of April. They're not sure because their bodies weren't discovered on a nearby island until May 26th. And the jurors were told they would be hearing evidence that the accused woman, Ruth Lawrence, who shot one of the men, but this wasn't immediately fatal, and it was quickly followed up by a shot from her boyfriend, a South African national, Mr. Neville van de Westhuizen. And the prosecution case was that both Ruth Lawrence and her boyfriend had spoken openly about the murders and the disposing of the bodies. And what we got then on day 2 was some of the kind of I suppose the nuts and bolts of the prosecution case, like we heard from the landlord of the house that they rented, this Patrick's Cottage on the shores of Lough Sheelin, where I think it's going to be, there was suggestion they didn't know where people were killed, but this is where Ruth and Neville were living at the time of the killings. The bodies were found on this island just offshore, or just close enough to the house. We heard evidence from their landlord then saying that they'd rented the place and he knew them to see, and that on the Monday, the 21st of April, that she had inquired about borrowing a boat. The weather was good, and and suggested that they want to go out on the lake. And that was followed by, could they borrow an outboard motor, that Neville had a bad back and he wasn't going to be able to row the boat himself. So there was all this sort of stuff. We heard from the auctioneer who had done the lease for them. And people living nearby saying they'd seen Neville drive a van up and down the laneway. They'd seen him in their BMW. This was the case the
prosecution were going to put. None of these witnesses have yet been called.
These are just the basics. Some of the witnesses we haven't heard from. Basically the story. The story was that there was 70 grand owed to Eoin O'Connor. And he was described in court as being a drug dealer from Finglas, and that this money was owed by Neville. And there was another man called Jason Sines and his daughter Stacey, who sometimes were also sourced drugs from either Neville van de Westhuizen or from Eoin O'Connor, and would sell them, in Ballyjames stuff where they lived. And we did actually hear some of the residents from that estate where they talked about, we could see people coming and going. And then we also heard after basically Eoin O'Connor and Anthony Keegan had disappeared, some people connected with Eoin O'Connor had turned up and began making threats to Mr. Sines. And we heard a statement from Sean Sines, which was read out in court, who talked about these guys calling to his house, demanding to know where his father was, looking for his phone number. On 3 occasions, being told that his throat would be slit in front of his children, his fingers would be cut off. And he said in this statement, which was read out in court, that he'd basically, fled to Northern Ireland at one point, such was his fear. And that man's fiance also spoke about the terror that they felt they were being put under. We also heard, I think it was in the opening statement, that Ruth Lawrence and Neville van de Westhuizen basically on the Thursday of that week, so that they basically left the country, went from Fishguard to London, and they were accompanied by the 2 Sines at the time. While they went on to South Africa, the other father and daughter, the Sines, they came back to Ireland at some point, were interviewed at length by the Gardaí, and we were expected, it was mentioned in court that they were expected to be witnesses as well as lots of other people. I'm not sure how many witnesses were going to be mentioned, but one of them, I remember, was witness 1111 at one stage. So there's quite a lot. And of course, there would have been an awful lot of witnesses to go through. The whole case was the juries have been told it lasts up to the 14th of November. So that's, it's quite some way to go. So we'll have to wait and see now what happens on Thursday. Yeah,
it will either go ahead or not. And there's nothing we can say about it at this point. So thanks for that update, Eamon.
Always a pleasure, Nicola.